Welcome to the Horns of Light Chronicles. Peter Berbelis chronicles his family story, prophecy, and testimony. God's story unfolds from his grandfather in Lithuania, Nazi Germany, the Russian Revolution, to Ronald Regan and the fall of the Berlin Wall, the gospel spreading across to Eastern Europe, how God called Peter to Petra, Jordan, and so much more as prophecy and testimonies unfold. And now the Horns of Light Chronicles. We're excited to be back with you today on Horns of Light. Very cool. There's angles of how God has taken Pete on this journey, which I find more than fascinating. I think you will today, too, as we're going to turn from Daniel a little bit, finish up with him, and then move on to some political things. And this being the election year and all the shenanigans that are going on around us, it's a great time to hear what God thinks about all that, or some of the things that God has been showing Pete. So jump on in there, Pete.
Yeah, so I guess kind of just wrapping up Daniel 12:3 had gone into that Daniel fast that we had talked about. And really, in the end, what I felt, one of the answers I wanted to know was why that angel had showed up in Galveston a few years in the what was that? That was back in 1992. And then in 1998, had that shaking experience where woke up and my bed was shaking. And I really felt kind of that the Lord was saying that there would be a similar type of event, kind of like that hurricane that hit Galveston, that there would be that kind of asteroid type of thing that would happen that would bring out the National Guard in Chicago someday, and I felt like that was what kind of tied those two events together. And we'll see. You know, it's just one of those things that we'll see. But kind of shifting gears now back into the political realm that you had just mentioned. So it was right before the 2020 elections, I really felt the Lord say, I want you to start getting involved in politics. And I really didn't know what that meant. So all I basically did was kind of took a stand for biblical marriage and threw a post up on social media, you know, saying that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that homosexual marriage was wrong. And boy, I knew that was going to create a backlash, and I just prayed to the Lord. I'm like, God, people are going to hate me over this. Have a variety of friends from different backgrounds, some Christians, some not, and that whole thing. And it really did cause an explosion. And I guess there's two things that I realized through that is God really does honor stands of righteousness, righteousness for him and for his ways and for what he stands for. And the second thing that was kind of shocking to me was just the number of Christians that have kind of bought into morality that is outside of God's word. So those were the two kind of shocking things. So that happened. And then I remember after the election, I'm not a huge, supporter of Trump. But I do like the values that he stands for. And so that's, there's so much negative in all of this political season right now, but I really did like the things that he stood for value-wise. And I just remember after the election, going to sleep, I woke up. This had to be, May, June of 2021. I woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't sleep and was just really grieved as far as just for my kids and their future and the way this country was headed. And so I turned on YouTube and came across an interview between General Boykin and Oliver North. And they were just kind of talking about the direction that the country was headed in. And they talked about Ronald Reagan quite a bit in that interview and just, what a great leader he was and the things that he had done for the country. And I was just kind of brokenhearted at the end of that interview. And I just remember saying a prayer to the Lord, would you raise up a man like a man of color like Ronald Reagan that carries the mantle of Ronald Reagan with a wife that honors you more than Nancy does? And couldn't go to sleep for the rest of that night. and was just like, Lord, would you just give me the grace to make it through the next day at work with pretty much no sleep. So next day I had to go and look at a bridge, and this bridge was out in the middle of nowhere. And so I'm driving out to look at this bridge on I-80 in Illinois, and I see all these signs for the birthplace of Ronald Reagan. So I go to turn off where I'm supposed to look at this bridge, and it's the same turn off for the birthplace of Ronald Reagan. So I turn off, and then the next turn that I have to make to look at this bridge, the sign points for the birthplace of Ronald Reagan. So after I get done looking at the bridge, I'm like, well, I'm going to take my break and check this out. This is beyond kind of coincidence to me that this happened the night before. So then I went to that small town, and it's a 2-block town. I mean, there's really not a lot to it as far as the main street goes. And I pulled over and just into this park, and they had all kinds of commemorative stuff related to Ronald Reagan. And there was a sign there, and it talked about the Reagan double rainbow, which was really interesting to me. And I guess what happened when Ronald Reagan was elected president of the United States, there was a photographer present in that hometown, and it looked like a double rainbow was coming out of his bedroom, or the birthplace, the place that he was born, up on top of this bank. And the photographer sent that picture to Ronald Reagan, and I guess Ronald Reagan would keep it in his desk, and he kind of felt that was from God, that he would have 2 terms, and any time he ran into difficult times, he would supposedly pull that picture out and look at it, knowing that God was with him, and that he was walking out kind of God's plan for his life. So that was a really interesting story to read about, and I was like, well, I need to find where he was born. So I end up pulling into that town, and it's a little apartment above a bank kind of thing. There was a red door there, and right next to it is kind of like a gift shop type of place. So I tried to see if there were hours, if anybody was there, if there was any way that I could get up to see where he was born. Nothing, no real signs or anything. So kind of turned around, went back to where my truck was parked, and opened up the door to get in. And right when I opened up the door to get in, I really feel a prompting of the Lord saying, I want you to go lay hands on that door and pray. And I'm like, this is really, really strange. But it was a very strong prompting. So I closed the door, start walking back, whatever that block that I was parked away to that red door. And just as I get to the sidewalk, a car pulls up, and lady opens the door, and I just say, ma'am, do you know how I could get inside to see where Ronald Reagan was born? She says, yes. She says, I have the key. And she said, give me a minute, let me just open up, and then I'll take you up there and give you a tour of the place. So so she did that, came up, went up stairs, and she took me right to his bedroom. And I just said, ma'am, would you mind if I say a prayer here? And she was like, not whatsoever. And she kind of backed out of the room, kind of the threshold of the room area, and just really prayed that same prayer. Lord, would you raise up a man of color that carries the mantle of Ronald Reagan, that'll bring this country together with a wife that honors you more than Nancy did. And the presence of God just really fell. I don't know how to describe necessarily it. And it was whatever God did at that moment. The lady noticed it too, and she was like, she just mentioned that prayer, and then anyway, was just moved. Some tears rolled out for me, and it was just one of those times where you knew God was doing something in the midst of it all. So then she took me through the rest of the apartment, very tiny apartment, and showed me the rest of the place. And it was just really kind of cool. She talked about how I think he wore glasses and he didn't like to wear his glasses, and he learned to swim in a town nearby called Prophetstown. And she just went through a few other things. And then we're walking down the stairs, and she looks at me and she says, people want to say President Trump was Ronald Reagan. She said, I'll tell you one thing, Donald Trump is no Ronald Reagan. And she talked about her activity. She's head of the Republican Party in that area, or was at that time, and she met Ronald Reagan and all this kind of stuff. So get back in my truck and want to leave, and I really felt the Lord say, I want you to pull into this gas station and get pizza and say a blessing over this town or whatever. And I was like, this is really, really strange. So I went and got Casey's is the big chain. They have pizzas by the slice at those gas stations here, and bought a slice of pizza, said to the cashier, God bless you. And it was just really strange because she was like, thank you. And it was just a very strong feeling of her entering into that simple sentence. It was just really weird. So ate the pizza and left that town, kind of a deal. And then so then what was really interesting to me was it was just a couple days later. I don't know if it was within that, I think it was within that same week, and Senator Tim Scott came up about it all in something, Drudge Report is one of the news things that I follow on a daily basis, and there was an article about him, and it was just all about him related to Ronald Reagan, and then I was like, well, this is really strange. So then I was like, did a Google search to see if he was married, and he wasn't married at that time. And he talked about how his kind of doorkeeper lady that the Lord, he really felt that the Lord had really brought them together. So I'm trying to horseshoe this. Lord raise up a man of color with a wife that honors you more than Nancy does. And so trying to horseshoe all that. And so I'm like, well, maybe this lady's this, and, expecting Senator Tim Scott to be nominated in this previous election cycle for president, if not the vice president, and all that kind of stuff. Just trying to figure it all out. But what was interesting to me was that just within the past couple of weeks, Senator Tim Scott got married. And when I read an article about their marriage, it just talked about how they met kind of doing a Bible study and just kind of described her as a really godly woman. And so I'm not really sure what role or where this is all headed. If you would have asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said he's going to be president of the United States, as you try to interpret things. But I just really feel like there's something that God has for him as far as bringing unity to this country at some point in time. And I don't know necessarily what that will look like. But it was just really interesting after that. There was just kind of a continuation of Reagan stuff just popping up all over the place in my life. My wife and I told her that story. We went back there the next week, and she was like, well, went to buy a postcard of the Reagan double rainbow and ended up buying one too many and was going to return it. And the lady's like, no, I also wanted one of his bedroom, the picture of his bedroom. And she's like, just keep them. So then a couple weeks later, went to a conference where Eric Metaxas was speaking and really felt prompted to bring this rainbow thing. And it was all about Luther, Martin Luther. So in the middle of this, he goes off and starts talking about Ronald Reagan and the falling of the Berlin Wall, which is significant to me because of my grandfather. So I handed him the postcard, one of the postcards afterwards. And so I didn't know. Then just another friend, tell him this whole story. who's a business owner and one of the guys who works under him. He hears the story, and I guess Jimmy Swaggart held some significance in his life as his mom passed away. They were playing some of his music, and he just said to my friend, next time you send me on a business trip down south, I'm going to drive to go see Jimmy Swaggart. And so we went and saw him, and in the middle he starts talking about Ronald Reagan of his sermon, and he's like, I want to go meet him, and goes talks to a guy, he doesn't always come out. And then so he goes and meets him, and he says to him, I met Ronald Reagan a couple times, and he said he was a believer. And then he said his wife Nancy, though I don't know about her. So it was just a lot of just this, odd coincidences related to this whole thing. And in the midst of him telling the guy that worked for him the story, they're sitting at a restaurant initially, and in walks the lady that really, the widow of the guy, when God had set everything off, as far as kind of walking into this heightened relationship with the Lord, I guess you could call it, back in 2018, as he's telling the story of the Reagan Double Rainbow. The lady walks in, and she ends up working at this restaurant, and it's away from where she lives, and just so many strange occurrences and coincidences. So that's kind of really the story, and just kind of continuing to look and see, but really feel like God has something in store for Senator Tim Scott. And just remember him. And one of the things I heard him say, he just really felt that God had a purpose for his life as far as bringing unity to this country. And he kind of mentioned that that's why he's staying in politics. So just a lot of odd coincidences related to that evening and watching that interview. So that's really it in relation to this story of Ronald Reagan and the Double Rainbow and watching